Dropstitch. What is Dropstitch? You've most probably heard this terminology. It's pretty much the core of your paddleboard. This is Dropstitch here. Thousands of threads joining the top and bottom together. So Dropstitch was originally designed for gymnastics mats. It was a low density material on a low grade substrate. So basically you put the air in and it was slightly spongy and you didn't hurt yourself doing gymnastics. Paddleboards need to be much more rigid than that. So we need to make sure that this is stiffer, lighter and can take more pressure. So we have two styles of Dropstitch. We have fusion Dropstitch and we have machine weave Dropstitch. Now, to not always confuse people is, this is the Dropstitch part, but it's also super important to know what this Dropstitch is connected to. So it's what we call a substrate. You'll see this substrate here is very closely knit. It's actually also fairly thick in thickness. So that means the board can take a large amount of pressure without pulling the strands off. Machine weave is very, very similar, but the machine actually weaves the knit on the top. That machine weave is tighter. So again, it's stronger, it's lighter because it's thinner. The strands within the board are also more stiff. So everything on this board becomes stiffer and lighter again. That's the core of your paddleboard. The strands and the substrate all combined into one, making your board rigid and stiff. You have a board that's lower density Dropstitch, lower density core of the substrate. You can't get the pressure in it. There's more movement of air, more unbalancement of the board. PVC layers. So we've talked about the Dropstitch, now we need to talk about the layers of PVC on your board. So if we go right back to the beginning, when they invented the inflatable paddleboard, this material, as we've talked about Dropstitch, is only available with a single layer of PVC bonded to that substrate. Now to make the paddleboard stiff at that time, I had to physically glue a second layer of PVC onto the board. It made the boards amazingly stiff, but it made them heavy, and there was also quite a high chance of having some sort of manufacturing defect with a bubble or something like that. So quickly we had to move on to fused double layer PVC. So the older style boards are very, very heavy, and when you hear companies now saying their boards are 20% lighter, what they're really referring to is that old technology that's now 10 years old. Hasn't been used for a long time. So most paddleboards, the way they're made, they should weigh very similar amounts. So if you have a double laminated PVC board with a high density Dropstitch, with a decent rail edge construction, they'll all weigh about the same. They might vary slightly for the thickness of the pad or how many handles you've got on them, but actually that's it. The only really way to make paddleboards lighter is to start removing the quality of the threads, the thickness of the substrate, or how many layers of PVC you have. So if you go back to single skin, that board is then lighter, but it's also not as rigid. By removing fibers, by removing skin, by removing substrate, that board is then lighter. So the most efficient way to make a paddleboard is to have a double laminated fusion technology. It's called many things, to be fair, fusion. It's two layers of PVC fused together before making the board. There's all sorts of exo weaves and I can't remember many of them today, but there is just so many. It's all the same, so don't get sucked into the hype. Obviously, you can make a paddleboard lighter with using machine weave that we've talked about. That is actually lighter, but it's going to be more expensive. You won't find that in a cheaper paddleboard. It's really used on very few brands at the moment with the premium lighter weight construction or specific needs like lightweight foldable travel boards. So yeah, really it's all about thickness and the skin. Don't get confused by my board's super light. It's either super light because it's very thin, and they're definitely not 20% lighter than how a board should be made, because actually I'll tell you what, a story Emmy always used to tell me was that if you take a jumper and you walk into a shop and you buy two knitted jumpers, they're the same size, the same material, same colour, and you hold one up and one's really light and one's really heavy, you go, okay, that one's got more material in it, that one's got less material in it, because that's the only two things that can be different from those jumpers, and that's the same with paddleboards. Pick up two paddleboards at the same size, and one has less strands in it, it's going to be lighter, not necessarily better.